So let's talk about something that sounds like it's straight out of a sci-fi movie, but it's quickly becoming our reality. Can an algorithm actually predict your guilt before you've even thought about committing a crime?
You know, we're all swimming in AI every single day, even if we don't realize it. It's in the background, making things happen. You've got researchers using it to figure out what our genes are going to do, and you've got artists using it to come up with entirely new kinds of music. It's this incredible tool for creativity, for discovery.
Okay, but this is where the story takes a really sharp turn. What happens when that same amazing predictive power isn't used to compose a song, but to compose a list of suspects? When the thing being predicted isn't a protein or a melody, but a person.
So, how did we even get here? Well, to understand that, you have to look at how AI first quietly slipped into the legal world. And it didn't start with predicting criminals. Nope. It started with something way, way more boring: paperwork.
See, at first, AI was basically a super smart intern for what they call the business of law. It was a huge help. You had these systems that could automate all the back-end stuff for big law firms, sorting through mountains of documents, organizing research, making sure the finances were all streamlined. It was a powerful assistant, for sure, but it was just an assistant.
But then, everything started to change. A really critical shift happened. The focus of AI in law enforcement began to move from analyzing places to analyzing people. It wasn't just about predicting where a crime might happen anymore. It was about predicting who might be the one to do it.
And look, this isn't just some theory. This is a direct quote from a recent White House policy memo. The U.S. government is literally creating rules for how its own agencies use AI for these exact things, giving people a risk score, predicting if they'll reoffend, and pointing out who the suspects might be. The idea of an algorithmic accuser, it's now a matter of official government policy.
In fact, the government has this really specific, kind of serious name for it: rights impacting AI. And that definition is so important. We are talking about AI systems where the computer's answer is a principal basis for a decision that could totally change your life. We're talking about things like getting bail, getting parole, or even just being tagged as a suspect in the first place.
Okay, so how does this whole thing actually work? Let's just break it down. First, the system just vacuums up massive amounts of data: arrest records, where you live, financial history, even who you're connected to on social media. Second, the AI churns through all that stuff and spits out what's called a risk score, basically a number that says how likely it thinks you are to do something in the future. And finally, that score gets handed to a person, a judge, a police officer, to help them make a call.
And that right there, that brings us to the absolute heart of the problem. The whole promise of this tech was pure, cold objectivity. But the reality? Well, it's a lot messier. The risks aren't just about how people use the AI, they're actually baked right into the code itself.
You can really see the massive conflict here, right? On one hand, the promise was that a machine would be free of all our messy human biases. But the reality is that it can actually just reinforce and amplify those same historical biases. The promise was speed and efficiency, but the danger is a system that has zero context, zero nuance. And the promise of preventing crime can so easily become the nightmare of a constant surveillance feedback loop.
And yeah, you guessed it, the White House memo has a name for this too: algorithmic discrimination. This is the government officially admitting that yes, AI can end up doing the very things our laws were created to stop, leading to unfair treatment just based on who you are.
Okay, this feedback loop is so important to understand. Think about it. If an AI is trained on decades of arrest data, and that data shows one neighborhood was policed way more heavily than another, what's the AI going to learn? It's going to learn that the over-policed neighborhood is a high-risk area. So it recommends sending more police there, which of course leads to more arrests, which creates more data that just confirms the AI's original bias. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The AI isn't really finding crime, it's just validating an old pattern. So with everyone seeing these huge dangers, governments all over the world are now basically scrambling to build some digital guardrails. They're trying to figure out how we can get the good parts of this technology without falling into its most dangerous traps.
Take the European Union, for example. They're kind of leading the charge with their AI Act, and it's all based on risk. They've created different tiers. Things with unacceptable risk, like a government-run social scoring system, are just straight up banned, gone. Then there's high-risk AI, and that includes these law enforcement tools, which are allowed, but they have to follow a ton of strict legal rules. And finally, you've got your low-risk stuff, like your email spam filter, which is pretty much left alone. It's a smart way to look at it. Not all AI is the same.
Now, the US is doing something similar, but with its own flavor. That White House memo sets out some very specific rules for these rights-impacting systems. It says agencies have to give people a way to appeal a decision to a real human. They have to tell you if an AI made a decision that affects you negatively. And, this is a big one, they have to give you an option to just opt out and deal with a person instead. Plus, they have to talk to the communities that are going to be affected and keep a close eye on these systems to make sure they're not being discriminatory.
So at the end of the day, what do all these rules from the EU, from the US, really boil down to? It's one single idea: human accountability. The whole point is to stop a future where we can all just throw up our hands and say, hey, the computer decided. These rules are all designed to keep a human in the loop, making them responsible, making them accountable for the final call.
And that leaves us with the big question, doesn't it? This push for perfect, efficient, mathematical justice is powerful. But as we build these incredible new tools, we're being forced to ask ourselves something really fundamental. Are there some decisions, especially when it comes to someone's freedom, to the very idea of justice, that are just too nuanced, too complicated, and maybe just too human for a machine to ever really understand?